choices. And I think that you have to understand that if you've led that kind of life, you may need professional help. You may not be able to stop that kind of behavior pattern by yourself. I went and got professional help, and I hope that other people will have the courage to do the same.
Okay, let me just take a quick call here, if we may. Is the caller there?
Yes, I am.
Go right ahead.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that I'm deeply disturbed and unhappy about this book. Millions of people in this country revere Joan Crawford, and this book is, I just don't know what to say about it. I would like to know why the book wasn't written before her mother died, first of all, and why did she put the title of the book, Mommy Dearest? There's a great deal of animosity in the title of this book. Why not Mother Dearest?
You were a fan of Miss Crawford?
Yes, I am. And I'm very upset by this.
May I ask you just a couple of questions?
Yes.
Why should the lie be perpetuated?
What do you mean?
Well, why should we be deceived
What she says is the truth. Miss Crawford isn't here any longer to deny any of this.
Oh, so you don't think it's true?
No, I don't.
You don't think that her daughter was hit over the head with a can of Donahue that sprayed all over her?
Well, that's a possibility. Mothers do get mad. I mean, her mother could have done something like that once and regretted it all her life, you know.
There's a passage in the book wherein Joan Crawford cut all the roses in the backyard in the middle of the night.
Rose garden, isn't it?
She also sawed down a fruit tree.
Well, that's her fruit tree, isn't it? I mean, I've done things like that. I have been mad, and the roses weren't taken care of by the children or something, and I've said, well, if you don't want to take care of the garden, then we'll get rid of the garden. They had a pony, and I said, well, if you won't take care of the pony, we'll get rid of the pony. I mean, mothers do that. That doesn't make you bad. I don't see why that should be traumatic.
Christina Crawford commenting.
Well, I first of all, I want to say that there is a difference between disciplining your children and abusing your children. It's a very fine line for many people, but it's something that I think that it's absolutely necessary to address ourselves to. We've had a philosophy, I think, for many years that children belong to their parents, that they are extensions of their parents, and that the parents have the right to do anything they please. And I think we have to rethink that. I think for both the parent and the child, it is vitally important to understand both people.
Well, I understand that, but I mean, we have...
Let me, you haven't read the book.
No, I've been reading the excerpts in either Inquirer or The Star. And each time I read them, I get more crazy. I mean...
All right, I know. Okay, I must break.
Well, may I just say one more thing?
I don't think you're surprised at the reading.
Mommy Dearest. And what did she do that her mother cut her off from the funds?
All right, the one thing I'd like to say to you is that you're really at a disadvantage asking these questions because you haven't read the book. And I think that...
Well, my friends haven't. They're as upset as I am.
Well, the thing is, I think if you read the entire book, you will understand some of the answers to your questions.
All right, I do beg your pardon and ask that you stay with us for the entire program. It's up to you.
Mommy Dearest. Why Mommy Dearest?
Mommy Dearest was the way she signed her letters.
Oh, I'm sure. Mommy Dearest. All right, okay. You buy it, I won't.
We're with Christina Crawford, and we hope you'll join us. Yes, it's with us. Yes.
Therapy. It seems to me that writing such a book would only increase guilt feelings and seem like a retaliation, something that I would feel guilty about.
In other words, you'd want to forget it.
Right.
Can you, though?
I never could if the whole world knew it.
In other words, you'd be embarrassed that everybody knew it.
That's right.
You'd
I
want to
think
keep
there's
this
some things that are too
Isn't it better, though, to get it out? I mean, if you hold it in, it's going to
There's
come out.
always a few close friends you could tell without telling the world. That would be the way I'd feel about it.
Well, I think telling the truth is difficult under any circumstances, but I think what I said earlier was that basically I was a public person from the time I was about 2 years old, so that a lot of my life was already public information, and it was a fantasy. It had nothing to do with reality, so that what I did was tell my story and take the right to tell my story for myself.
You know, when my kids were young, I can remember whenever I introduced them to the priest or my boss or somebody that I wanted to impress, I looked at him as if to say, don't pick your nose, you know. I mean, I think, don't we all do that? It sounds to me like you had a enormously exaggerated sense of that with your mother.
Well, I think that it was exaggerated perhaps by the fact that we were both public people, so that we were not private people to begin with.
Didn't you really resent that being trotted out in your little pinafore all the time?
A child only knows their own world. You don't have much to compare it to. So that I didn't really realize that the rest of the world lived very differently than we did until I was much older, 8, 9, 10 years old, when I got into school and saw other people and heard how other children lived.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Ms. Crawford, you were talking about other people relating to you of a story that they've tried to tell or a cry they've come out with. Is this book something that you had thought about for a long time that you'd wanted to do and at some point had the ability to put it down on paper?
Well, I thought about it on several different occasions at various times in my life, but I didn't feel that I had the personal perspective to write the book. And also, I didn't feel that the relationship with my mother, which is a focal point of the book, had in any way concluded or resolved itself.
Your mother was in love with Clark Gable. You suggest that he was only one of two men that she loved?
Well, I think there were probably 2 or 3 men that she was unable to dominate, so that she had great respect for them, and I think a lifelong love for them for some of those very reasons.
Why do you think your mother knocked you around like that? Why do you think she did that? You admit she loved you.
Yes, and I.
So you know your mother loved you.
That's right.
I don't know how you know, but I'll take your word for it. You know, it's hard to see that through this kind of
I know it is. I know it is. But that's probably one of the most difficult things to understand about this book. You see, it would have been much easier, perhaps, if I could have said at any given point in my life, that's it, I can't take any more and I'm leaving. And a lot of people have asked me why I didn't do that. That was simply my choice. My brother had some different choices. He tried to leave. But those were my choices, and that's the way I dealt with it.
You're at peace with the book, and did you expect this kind of attention? This is a national incident, this book.
Yes, it is. I have been told that there has never been a book like this book, and it is touching people's lives in a way that was beyond anything that I had imagined, because I think it is written through the eyes of a child, so that what happens is people actually have an experience when they're reading this book, and they feel some of the helplessness that the child feels. They feel some of the frustrations that a child feels, and I think maybe for the first time as adults they are able to look at some of the things that happened in their own lives. Now, if people are not used to doing that, that's going to upset them a lot.
Yeah. You wonder how many doors you've opened for this.
I don't know.
You know what I mean?
It's just the beginning, yes.
Who else is going to write a book about Mommy or Daddy?
Well, who else is going to start dealing with their lives? Who else is going to start having some insight into their own problems that they think are perhaps only personal? Who else is going to have the courage to go and ask for help? How many children are going to be spared? How many parents are going to rethink their own behavior and understand that the phenomenon is that most parents who are abusive were themselves abused, and they need help, they need understanding, they need the very things they're trying to get from their children, and their children can't give them. They're asking from the wrong people.
You had a fallopian cyst, a growth tumor, and you were really very ill. You thought you were going to die.
Yes, I did.
And at the time you were on Secret Storm, the CBS soap opera. And obviously they, however they do, temporarily wrote you out of the script. Your mother replaced you.
Yes.
And you thought that was what?
Well, first of all, I was in the hospital. I'd had an emergency operation, and I was only in a semi-conscious state. I was extremely ill when I found out that my mother had offered to replace me. In fact, some of your audience may remember that. I was barely able to understand what was going to happen at that particular point, but it was extraordinary because I was a woman at that time in my late 20s and she was a woman in her early 60s. But she had watched me every single day that I had been on the soap opera, whether she was traveling or whether she was at home. And we had discussed my work and that part, so she felt that she had a kinship with it, if you can understand that. But it was very difficult for her, and I think it showed.
Well, it was not only difficult. You watched in horror as your mother...
I was in the hospital, yes.
You were in the hospital, and up on the screen, I suppose, in the wall, like in hospitals, your mother came onto the screen as an actress playing your part in Secret Storm, and you sat there, lie there in horror because your mother was drunk.
Yes, she was. Yes, she was.
The book is titled Mommy Dearest, and we'll be back in just a moment. Christina Crawford is on the line. Hi. Is the caller there?
Yes.
Go ahead.
When I was a teenager, friends of ours had a motel that was near Drury Lane. And when Miss Crawford was staying at this motel, I had to call after that other woman called and said she couldn't believe anything in that book. We were at poolside, and she came out, and we naturally got excited. There were a lot of stars that stayed there, and they were all very nice to us.
Okay, we have very little time, okay? You'll get to your point.
Very nasty to us and treated us like dirt, and we found out she was nasty to everyone at that motel. Nothing was good enough for her, and she was never happy.
Mm-hmm.
So I can believe everything that was in that book. It can't be a lie.
Your mother was, the problem is your mother, like everybody, was not always nasty, right?
No, everybody has two sides to them, and I think that's, in the book, those are the loving moments. Those are the moments that we shared together, and as a public person, my mother was capable of not only extraordinary friendship, but also great generosity and works of charity, but there were two different people. There was the public woman, and then there was the private woman.
Mm-hmm. I thank you for calling. Yes. Hang on just a moment. Let me just think. Yes.
Ms. Crawford, I understand your mother also has adopted 3 other children besides yourself.
That's right.
Has she abused all 4 of her children?
No,
or are
only
you the
2
only
of
one?
us. Only 2 of us.
Is there a reason why just the 2 of you and not the other 2? Or?
Well, I don't know. Those reasons are hard to understand, but I do think that it had something to do with the fact that her life changed quite a bit after she adopted my sisters. They started boarding school very young, and also by the time they were 7, my mother had remarried, and her life had changed radically. She moved to the East, and she had a new career, and I think she had resolved some of those problems.
Hello, I'd like to know what your mother's friends think of this book.
I haven't heard from all of them, needless to say. I have seen quotes that have been attributed to some of them. I think the ones that knew her best understand the book best because they saw some of that for themselves. I think other people, quite honestly, are upset that I wrote the book.
Yes.
Miss Crawford, if your life was so bad, why didn't you leave when you got older?
I tried to once. I tried to run away once. I didn't get very far. My brother tried to run away many times, and he was not successful. Our feeling was that the world in which we lived in was totally controlled by my mother. That was the impression that we had, and that there was no place for us to go. We had no relatives, and there were no authorities we could turn to.
Yeah.
Miss Crawford, do you think the fact that your mother drank too much had anything to do with the way she abused her children?
Yes, I do.
But alcoholism came later.
It